We want to welcome you to AngelMD's Pitch Club, devoted to the specialty of cardiology. I was going to make a little joke that it's actually going to be a political debate tonight, but that's, we're going to hold off till later on that. I'm Katie Richardson. I'm the Vice President of Clinical Relations, and I just want to welcome all of you to Pitch Club. If this is your first time at Pitch Club, I'm just going to tell you a couple things about how we do this. We have 3 startups that are going to be presenting tonight, and I think you'll find them very interesting. Each of the startups will have 7 minutes to present, followed by about 5 minutes of Q&A. We would love for you to put any questions either during the pitch or as they finish up in the Q&A function, which should be on your bottom toolbar, the far right. And during that Q&A, we have Dr. Andrew Freeman with us tonight, who is a cardiologist, and he's going to be fielding questions and I think picking out the toughest ones to send on to our startups tonight. So for those of you that have not been to Pitch Club before or don't know what AngelMD is all about, I'm going to give you a little background. So AngelMD is a community and a platform that connects medical startups, physicians, investors, and industry to create better outcomes for all parties. The company leverages software, data, and the power of our expert clinical network to disrupt how early stage investments are sourced, analyzed, and managed. So again, we welcome you. We are going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to say a couple of more things. First, I'm going to introduce the folks that are here from AngelMD. So we have Tobin Thur via phone. He is our founder and executive chairman. We have Jennifer Arthur, our co-CEO of membership. We have Mike Raymer, our chief strategy officer. We also have Mike Szymanski in our audience tonight. He's our head of finance. And Dr. Mark Froimson, who is our chief medical officer. I believe we may also have Ramsey Jalad, who's our managing director of MedHealth Capital. So, and you'll get to meet each of our startup presenters here in just a moment. As I mentioned, we have a clinical expert with us today, Dr. Andrew Freeman. And I want to say that our night tonight is sponsored by 2 different folks. One is Halo Creative Labs, and you can check them out for all your marketing, design, and creative needs at halocreativelabs.com, as well as the ACC, or the American College of Cardiology. And Dr. Freeman, I would love for you to say a couple words about the ACC for us.
So hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all. So I'm Andrew Freeman, a cardiologist in Denver, Colorado. I do a lot of work with the American College of Cardiology. And for those of you on the call that are connected to cardiology in some way, I just wanted to let you know that the ACC actually has an innovation section, which is a member interest group within the ACC that actually includes all the various folks that do things in the cardiology startup or tech space. And we'd love to invite you to join if that's you. And also, there's a lot of innovation projects that we're working on as a college, which is a lot of fun. And one of the great ones is that we're partnered with AngelMD, in addition to a number of other health startups. And nonetheless, it's always fun to see what's out there, and welcome you to join the ACC if you haven't already.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you to the ACC as well as Halo Creative Labs for sponsoring our night tonight. All right, one of the things we're going to ask of our attendees this evening, after each of these startup presentations, again, we would love for you to put questions in the Q&A function, just because, again, we want to drill our startup CEOs and founders here today. No, we want you to get the information that you want to know about these companies. Again, Pitch Club is really for fun. This is not for the purposes of investment. It gives our startups the opportunity to practice their pitch, and it allows them to get feedback from our expert network. So one of the things that you'll find is after each pitch and Q&A, there will be a poll that will come up. And in that poll, it's going to ask you to rate these startups and how they did this evening. One of the exciting things for the startup that is rated the highest tonight is they will actually get another opportunity to have an investment pitch in front of investors, which could include our clinicians, physicians, and other medical experts as well. So please, 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 when the poll comes up, we would love your feedback. And then the last thing that I will say, we will have some follow-up and we can say more about this, but after the event, we are going to create an opportunity for all of you to engage with these startups ongoing via LinkedIn. So more about that as we move through the night. I think in the chat if you're a Twitter fan, there is the @AngelMD_Inc. Twitter handle that you should be tagging tonight, and use the hashtag Pitch Club. So without further ado, I know there are people on this webinar that are very excited to watch the next hour, which will be much more heated, I'm guessing. So we will get started with our startups. So our first presenter tonight is Atandra Berman of RCE. He is the CEO of this company. And Atandra, I will let you go ahead and share your slides and go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Katie. Much pleasure. If you can just enable the attendee screen sharing. Right now it's disabled. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, everyone. Atandra Berman, founder and CEO of RCE. This is a company I started back in 2018 with a mission to detect heart attacks early. I started this with my own personal loss in a family from silent heart attack, and realized that there was an opportunity to build something that can revolutionize cardiac care. And first, starting with heart attacks in the hospitals today, emergency departments across the United States, 83% of all chest pain patients who come to the emergency department are non-cardiac related. This means millions of people every year incur unnecessary ER stays, unnecessary redundant tests and costs. And this is a huge problem because this is taking away a lot of time and resources away from labs. And while today this problem is solved by incumbents using state-of-the-art machines, which require blood samples, which require these clinicians to advocate, blood draws and have these invasive procedures, RCE has revolutionized this process. We have reimagined the way proteins are monitored in the blood, and we introduced strobe sensor. This is a completely non-invasive solution to monitoring for cardiac troponins. As you know, this is a cardiac protein injury biomarker, and we have been able to design a technology that can now pick up this protein without the need for a blood draw. And this is very simple to use. As you can see in the video here, it places very simply on a station, very stable. We designed it with the help of nurses and doctors in the ED and ICU. And this was very much a process that helped us align and fit right into the standard of care workflow. Now, this uses an optical-based technology, which clearly is continuous. We're able to pick up this data in a non-invasive way, and we've had great success in the clinical setting. So through our translational research in the last 2 years, we have been able to demonstrate a strong correlation with standard of care. We started with in vitro studies all the way to in vivo, and we were able to demonstrate a high 94% correlation with standard of care troponin I measurements. Not only that, we were able to extend further a study with UCSF, which we recently conducted and completed with 60 patients, and are actively working with other clinical sites like Wellstar Health System and New York Presbyterian in extending that clinical validation. Now, one of the things and the most exciting thing for us was we were able to position this in front of 10 to 12 hospitals around the country, like Cedars-Sinai and Texas hospitals. And the common thing was this was going to be a game changer, having non-invasive bedside tropes was something clinicians were very excited. They said this could fit in right at the emergency department with the medics. In fact, they even thought this could extend further into remote clinics, into urgent cares, all the places where there's traffic of people with chest pain, but they don't have labs. Or if they do have labs, like in the emergency department, it takes about 55 minutes to get data. Now we have these troponins along with ECG right there in the first few minutes, allowing clinicians to make an instant diagnosis and risk stratify patients directly to the cardiac cath lab or bypass the ER stays and monitor or discharge them. Very exciting. So now looking at the applications into the emergency department, remote clinics, inpatient monitoring, the NSTEMI monitoring, post-op, perioperative MIs, also having application of this in the medics, ambulances to accelerate the diagnostic protocol is huge. Now, we were very excited, and in the last few months, we have been able to connect with the FDA and share some of our initial clinical findings. And the FDA was very excited. They thought this was a technology that should move to market fast. They believe this is a strong candidate for the breakthrough device designation. Now, we work with them closely on a pre-sub and the device designation process. What we also found out this year was that this comes with a 4-year Medicare coverage through the CMS. That's huge. Not only that, talking to all our customers, we found out that we could piggyback off the reimbursement for troponins and get a $10 per patient read. Now, given a 500-bed hospital runs about 200 troponins per day, this gives us a massive opportunity towards significant cash flow and also a line of sight towards a lucrative return on investment with an exit in 3 to 5 years with our competitors like Roche, Abbott, Philips, Siemens, all the ones who have invasive blood draws. All that said, we're very excited to move through the next few months into next year where we expect to have our clearance. What we have today is patents filed, products in hospitals. We've done our initial validation. Now we're working towards our pivotal trials and with the FDA towards a pre-market submission early next year and expecting clearance by this time next year and in the market. Very excited. User funds are definitely going towards the pivotal trials, the pre-market submission, and definitely a global footprint of data and relationships. Now, that said, we know chest pain does not happen just in the hospitals. And the long-term vision that we see is that we can expand our technology outside of the hospitals into the homes of all those people, like silent heart attack candidates, diabetic candidates. And these people can be monitored with the help of two things, ECG and troponins. This has never been done before. ECG through a 12-channel ECG vest, which is machine washable, can seamlessly integrate into the elderly. And the same way, troponins and other ischemic biomarkers like FABP3 can be monitored through our flagship product, miniaturizing the trope sensor nano. Now, what we have been able to do so far is concurrently collect this data set, and we've been even able to build an ischemic model based on ECG that is highly accurate. We're able to look at ST segment changes, the deviations, the T-wave inversions, the ST elevation, and we're very excited now to, through our channel partnerships, putting devices in hospitals around the world. We have devices right now in India, in the US. We're close to getting devices also in Brazil and Dubai and other countries. The market application for this, as you know, is huge. We know chest pain can happen anywhere, and we think our diagnostic kits can fit in the homes. They can fit in ambulances, in urgent cares, minute clinics, a lot of places. And we're on this mission to detect heart attacks before they happen. Now, that said, I'll close off here by just saying that we have our profile up on AngelMD. We're very excited. We're getting some good traction with the clinical community and would love to take more questions. I've also included my contact information right here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Atandra. I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Freeman. As I mentioned up front, if you have questions for Atandra about RCE, please put those in the Q&A. And if our panelists have any questions as well, go ahead and put those in the chat for us. And Dr. Freeman, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, and please keep me on time. I know we only have about 5 minutes for questions. So first is, obviously this seems like an amazing technology. How does it actually work? You know, has it been validated in multiple skin types, conditions? Lots of people with heart attacks are sweating, all kinds of stuff like that. And then how good is it, right? So we saw a little bit of a scattergram there, right? You know, but what's the false positive rate? What's the false negative rate?
Great question, Dr. Freeman. So I'll just circle back for reference back to the slide. Let me know if you can see my slide. I think I lost it. Sounds good. So this device, strobe sensor, the goal with this device is it can pick up cardiac troponins, right? And so our goal with this in our clinical studies was to show correlation with standard of care, exactly what's measured by troponins with a blood-based immunoassay and what's done with a non-invasive technology. So we've done this through a series of in vitro and in vivo studies. As you can see, one of the studies here with 24 patients, 13 of which were within the bounds, had a distribution of cardiac troponins, and we were able to fit very well. Additionally, we did 60 patients with UCSF in vitro, so having blood samples on the device. Again, we're just doing a troponin to troponin, or very standard correlation study here. There are false positives with troponin, but again, on the heart attack side, that is another thing, so right now we're just focused on the device giving a troponin readout. This is completely optical based. And does that answer your question? Is there anything else?
So I think, as a card carrying cardiologist, we really want to know, for instance, if this device comes up 0, how many times is it 0 when we check the blood?
Yeah, so that's a great question. False positive, false negatives, and how specific it is. So this is definitely a device that we've seen in our studies to go to a very low level. It can pick up picograms. We've been able to actually look at sensitivity across a spectrum of different patients. And this is just a spread across 24 patients where we looked at troponin values. And I would actually point you to an anecdotal case, for example, patient number 9. And this patient at entry into the ER at time 0 had a reading of 0.13 nanogram per liter. And this person eventually went to 23 nanogram per liter. And we were able to not only pick up the load value, which you see on the below the line, but we were also able to pick up the value at 23. This is very promising. This is indicating that we're able to sensitively pick up that parameter very closely and pick it up. Now, to your false positive, false negative, yes, so this is early studies, initial studies that have shown a very good delineation with a high outcome to MI being delineated. So everything above this median line is showing ventricular dysfunction. So STEMI and STEMI, we're looking at unstable angina with ejection fraction less than 40%. So very exciting so far. Now, one of the questions you asked was around different types of body morphologies. We have done tests around those with different color types. We've done tests with sweat, presence of sweat, with sweat, without sweat. We've also done tests monitoring these patients for continuous amount of time for over an hour. And those have shown good data points.
Yeah, I think at least for a clinical trial, you probably should want to show that data in the future. But was there another question? I heard someone jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to ask some of the questions being asked.
Sorry, Dr. Freeman, this is Katie. I just wanted to let you know we have time for about one more question.
Okay. So someone was talking about the possibility of, does this work like a heart scan where you can kind of predict silent heart attacks? So if you found someone at higher risk, would you give them that home kit and let them wear it? And then if their troponin turns positive, they run to the hospital, or do they have to have symptoms, or is there an EKG with it?
Yeah, good question. So right now our focus is on strobe sensor, and the positioning of this is in the emergency departments. So this is basically for clinicians in the ED to measure troponins bedside. And that's what we're doing. We're not doing any predictions of outcomes or anything like that right now. Does that, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think we're out of time, but there's definitely people are looking for more data, which you may want to share next time.
Definitely. And we have technical papers that we can share on this.
And like I said, we will have some additional time potentially at the end of this evening. And if not this evening, we will have a LinkedIn group where you will have time to answer the remainder of these questions. So they will not go away, and we will get the answers for the folks that are in the audience. You probably see the poll that's been put up. And again, all of you that are attendees here tonight, we would love for you to answer these questions. And this feedback is going to go directly to the startup. And they are excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Kate.
Yes, thank you. We'll give you just a moment to continue to fill out the poll. And Jennifer, I think you're gonna talk to everyone about the clinical advisory board for us.
Absolutely. So we have a clinical advisory board. We actually have them by specialty, and we're wanting to grow and expand it. So we are inviting people who would be interested in partaking in it to let us know. We'll be sending out information tomorrow with the follow-up email to this event for what you need to do to be able to join our clinical advisory board. But really, we're looking for people with varied backgrounds and varied experience. And our goal is really to have you kind of provide guidance on trends you're seeing in your specialty, key innovation, introduction to other clinicians, and just really an opportunity for us to dig in and get your expertise and insights on what's going on within your specialty. And the way we do this is we have 4 quarterly meetings. We have 1 per quarter, so 4 meetings a year. That's about an hour for us just to ask questions and engage with you. We do also look to our clinical advisory board for providing more in-depth evaluations of companies as they're going through the process preparing for investment through AngelMD. So if that's also something you're interested in, we would love to have you join the clinical advisory board.
Great, thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and end this polling now.
That sounds good. Thank you to all of you who answered questions and gave some feedback to RCE. We're going to move on to our second presenter. We have William Altman here with us today from Corinnova. He is the president and CEO. And William, I'll go ahead and let you share your screen.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm CEO of Corinnova. We're developing a new type of cardiac assist device for acute heart failure. As you can see, we've been supported by the Texas Medical Center Venture Fund. We're resident at Johnson & Johnson J Labs in Houston. And we've received a large part of our financial support, $6 million, from Wellcome Trust, which is kind of like the Gates Foundation of England. And we were named in 2019 by the Capital Association as having the best investment potential among all industries in the top 3. Very proud of that. But as you know, acute heart failure is a significant clinical syndrome. It affects up to 1 million people a year with various degrees of acute heart failure that are hospitalized for this. And a good portion of these people do need temporary mechanical support, 7 to 9 days, to bridge them to recovery or bridge them to making a decision as to what type of a maybe longer term device they might need, or as their symptoms clear up for a lung deficiency or a kidney deficiency. And of course, there are existing devices out there to help them, which are very, very good. But on the other hand, these other devices are limited by the fact they have an extensive blood device interface. The intra-aortic balloon pump, of course, is out there, doesn't provide as much support. You've got the Abiomed Impella device providing significant support. And then, of course, the only biventricular device would be the venous arterial ECMO configuration. As these all have a lot of blood contact. And the problem with blood contact is it's associated with significant adverse events. And surprisingly, in only 5 days of use, the literature shows that you can have up to a 15% rate of stroke, 5 to 13% rate of hemolysis, often requiring blood transfusions, and even 21 to 47% rate of kidney dysfunction and outright kidney failure, 12% associated with VA ECMO. So that's a very significant set of adverse events. And But importantly, there's a lot of patients that really are not able to use existing devices. We estimate 25 to 40% of patients can't use existing devices. A good chunk of patients, according to literature, up to 16% of cardiogenic shock patients have peripheral arterial disease, which prevents the catheters from being placed in the femoral artery. Also, patients with a recent bleed or otherwise intolerant of anticoagulants can't use these devices because they need to use the anticoagulants to prevent a stroke. And of course, 20 to 30% of patients, or 25% of patients actually be better off with biventricular support, but because of the invasiveness of VA ECMO, often they do not receive that biventricular support. So a large number of patients really are not served by today's devices. Our solution is this new generation of cardiac assist device. You can see it's a thin film polyurethane cup that fits around the heart. It has a nitinol wire framework for collapsing the device, giving a framework and providing a minimally invasive way to implant it. We don't touch the blood. We assist both ventricles at once. We provide both systolic and diastolic support to help fill the heart, as well as increase the flow. It can be rapidly implanted. It provides a very gentle direct cardiac compression. Very low pressure device, but very effective. This animation shows how the device can be folded down into a 1-inch delivery tube. We would then approach the heart through 2 left side ribs with eventually a percutaneous procedure to implant it inside the pericardial sac. We have inner chambers in this device we fill with saline to conform it to the heart shape. And then we have outer chambers that we fill with air in synchrony with the heartbeat in order to gently squeeze the heart, just like a surgeon might do while the patient's on the operating table, and provide that heart massage to get it going again. But we can do that for hundreds of thousands, millions of times to provide effective bedside support that actually also would allow ambulation, which a lot of the devices do not. As I said, here's a fluoroscopic video of the device being implanted in a sheep, which has a heart very similar in size to humans. And you can see how quickly it goes in. There's no direct attachment because it sits inside the pericardial sac, and we take all the free air out of the chest. That keeps it in place. We've had 100% success in deploying it minimally invasive this way. 55 deployments by 6 surgeons and 23 one-day large animal studies in acute and chronic heart failure models, with an estimated 10 minutes to device activation and estimated 30-minute surgery time. And physicians tell us they believe this is less invasive than minimally invasive aortic valve replacement because of course, we never puncture any of the arteries or any of the vasculature of the body. The device enhances its cardiac motion to increase output by 50%. You can see the device off on the left in a heart failure model in a sheep, and then the device turned on the right. And you can see that gentle squeezing that's increasing that output by 50%. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. We're providing the same heart massage a surgeon does, but mechanically and minimally invasively. This just shows some of the clinical data in our published research showing the device. In the middle, you see the chart of the aortic pressure with the device on versus the device off. We maintain pulsatile flow, which existing devices do not. And then you can see in the bottom left how that increase in aortic pressure and flow is driven in large part by the increase in the stroke volume as we are pushing more blood out of the heart itself, 50% more. So anyway, we've had extremely good experience with this. We've gotten very good feedback from clinicians that perhaps one of the spots we might want to start is to provide superior biventricular support for patients, because the only approved short-term device, VA ECMO, has a very high 15% rate of stroke, 20% rate of bleeding, 12% rate of renal failure, and high amounts of blood use. Whereas with our device, we wouldn't expect to have any of those types of adverse events. And we've even had physicians kind of emailing us, say, gee, we'd love to have your device for patients like this because, the alternatives are not pretty. So we think there's a large number of patients where we really have no competition, and that would also help us in terms of quick regulatory approval. Our next steps are to begin our first in human studies within 24 months. The next 12 months, we'll be doing, we've already had an FDA informational meeting, be doing pre-submission meetings, then doing 7-day large animal studies in a chronic model of heart failure. And then we will move on to our final safety studies, design device for human use to begin first in human, really in only 24 months with a completion in 36 months. And the thing about this space is because of the high reimbursement for these devices at $25,000 each for the Impella, that this offers the opportunity for an early exit at a premium price. Other cardiac medical device companies have sold for up to $450 million in cash with only 10 patients of first-in-human data. And if we need to take it further, we could do a 20-patient safety study. We've raising $3 million this year. We've already raised half of that, $1.5 million, to complete these 7-day large animal studies. And then the following 2 years require about $6 million a year to get to that first-in-human inflection point, which again would be a major increase in value for the investor. Could be a potential 8 to 18x return. And just in summary, Corinnova, I would think, offers an exciting new non-blood contacting method of support. We've got excellent animal data. There's high reimbursement already in place. As Atandra said, also, if we are also going to apply for breakthrough device designation, which would give us, and our regulatory advisor is Susan Alford, former chief regulatory officer of Medtronic. She believes we have very good, should be able to get that designation, which would also give us guaranteed Medicare reimbursement for 4 years. And again, with this high reimbursement, we think there's an early exit potential at a premium with first-in-human data. So I'm happy to answer your questions and very excited to be able to bring this technology to you and to get your feedback.
All right, William, thank you so much for being here tonight and for presenting. It looks like we have a few questions. So Dr. Freeman, I'll let you go ahead and pose those to William and Corinnova.
Yeah, so William, a great device, and wow, what an amazing potential. So a few questions from a technical standpoint. There's a question regarding when you put this in the pericardial space, obviously this can compress epicardial coronary arteries and potentially even cause ischemia. And then the question, of course, is many of our patients who need such a device or chronic heart failure have pericardial fluid or even had pericardial windows or even pericardial stripping. So what do you do when there is no pericardium? And then what are the device failure points? Obviously, there's got to be some failure. What is it?
Okay, let me take those three in order here. So the first, if you can remind me, the first question was?
That's the one about the coronary arteries and the squeezing.
Right. Right. Well, you know, the heart actually, the surface of the heart actually undergoes filling when the heart is in diastole, when the heart is relaxing is when the coronary flow would occur. So our device is not squeezing at that point. So, you know, we're squeezing, you know, at systole, but not a diastole. So other studies, you know, we've already done a 5-day safety study with the device. We found no evidence of any epicardial damage or any sort. We did a complete pathology report, and after 5 days implantation, the device came out extremely easily, just the way it came in. So we haven't really seen any potential for that damage. And we know there was some prior technology that didn't work as well as this, but they also studied this and did not find that it impeded coronary flow. A second question is, there are going to be some patients that this will not be indicated for. We would target patients that have an intact pericardium as opposed to those that maybe do not have a pericardial sac. I can't speak specifically to the issue of fluid in the pericardial sac. We haven't really talked to our advisors about that in detail. It hasn't really come up, although I'm sure it's a significant issue for some patients, I would imagine. But we have looked and we have found that 80% of acute patients had surgeries, so the pericardium should be intact for, you know, many of these patients that we would come into contact with. Was there a third question?
What's the failure point? When does this device go bad?
Well, we intend to go for only 7 days use, just like Abiomed and Pella is generally approved for 5 days or less. So we're going for about 7-day approval to provide short-term support, and so they're safe for margin of safety. We would want to have at least 14 days durability. But we've actually gotten up to 100 days of durability with the device as it's constructed now. And we believe with some further manufacturing improvements that we can get that even beyond that point. So we do have a safety features built into the device. We use air, which if it did get out, wouldn't necessarily, could be absorbed, but we have, one is we have a fixed amount of air in the driver. So there's only so much air that can even be pushed through the system because we have what we call safety discs, like a balloon pump. We also monitor the pressure and we can see if there's a leak occurring. And in addition, we have an outer containment layer around the whole device so that if there ever was a small leak, that it would be contained within that layer.
Okay, and do you anticipate this ever being destination therapy? So where there are some people who may not get a transplant or some sort of intervention, would this be placed in for the long term?
I think another version of this device would be great for destination therapy. This particular version of the device, we were trying to make as thin and as collapsible and as quickly implantable as possible. And so that does place some limitations on the durability. So I think that we'd probably need to do a slightly different version of the device that may be a bit bulkier in order to get the destination therapy. But I think given the fact there's so many adverse events associated with long-term use of these devices, that it would be a great advantage to have something like this as well. And of course, the recovery time for for an implantation like this, for compared to that for chronic VAD, would just be substantially less.
And then
All
lastly,
right, Dr.
Oh.
Freeman, we have time for one more question.
right, the question is this triggered by EKG? So as you know, a lot of these folks are going to have arrhythmias. How does it work in that case?
Yes, it is triggered by the EKG. We do have algorithms for dealing with arrhythmias. I mean, basically just like the balloon pump, I think. In fact, our VP of product development and one of our consultants both work for Datascope, which is a major maker of balloon pumps, McKay balloon pumps. And so they have extensive experience with designing the software to deal with arrhythmias and with that sort of thing. So we would attempt to basically stay out of the way if it was a really bad situation, let the doctor medicate as needed. We have dealt with a tachycardic sheep, and we did every other beat, and were able to actually recover the animal after a few hours that had some issues there. So we would deal with it much the way the existing balloon pump technology does.
Great.
Very carefully, and let the doctor just get in the situation to medicate the patient when necessary.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, William. Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Thanks for presenting Corinnova to us tonight. I know there are a lot more questions, and we will make sure that those get answered after the event. Again, we will have a LinkedIn group where folks will be able to see the answers to the questions that didn't get answered tonight, and also interact with our CEOs and the companies more. So you will see the poll up for Corinnova. Again, these startups really would love your feedback from a clinical perspective. This is, I'm guessing, probably one of the largest clinical groups that they have had to give feedback in one place. So please take some time and fill out the poll for us. And while you are doing that, I'm going to turn things over to Mike Raymer, and he's going to talk a little bit about the AngelMD Catalyst 2020 Fund.
Thanks, Dr. Richardson. Great job this evening, and thanks in particular to the startups and physicians that are on the webinar this evening. I see a number of friends on the call, and thank you for taking time. AngelMD is really excited to announce the launch of our Catalyst 2020 Fund. This $10 million fund is designed specifically for dentists, physicians, and other healthcare experts. And this is a growth fund, so it's really focused on earlier stage investing in companies that have been vetted by you, the physicians on our network. Going forward, this will be the only way in which you can invest in a AngelMD startup. So we will no longer be doing the syndication function. We launched a fund about 3 years ago. It's done exceptionally well. It has an internal rate of return of 44% and no startup failures so far. So by design in the fund, we'll be able to accommodate up to 250 investors in this fund, which will allow for lower minimums. And we'll also have a mechanism for being able to direct 401k funds. And the targeted close date of this fund is early in 2021. And we'll be targeting to make investments early as capital starts coming into the fund, either late in 2020 or early 2021. So we'll be sending more information out about this fund, but we're really excited about the opportunity to both engage our membership and be able to support the right kind of innovations that need funding to be able to change the lives of patients globally. So thanks very much, Katie. I'll turn it back over to you.
right, I'm going to
Sorry.
end this polling as well.
William, I need you to stop sharing your screen,
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry. All right.
That's
let's see.
okay. And thanks to all of you who voted. We really appreciate the feedback. I know the startups do, but we like to see what you have to say about these companies at AngelMD as well. So we're going to move on to our final startup of the night. And we have Samir Wadki here with the Thrubricar Aortic Valve Inc. He is the Vice President of Business Development.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richardson. And good evening, everybody. I know you're excited for the debate, but I appreciate you taking the time to hear our pitch as well as to the other presenters. Again, my name is Samir Wadki. I'm a co-founder of Thrubricar Aortic Valve Inc., which is testing a next-generation transcatheter aortic valve for the TAVI, also known as TAVR procedure, for aortic stenosis patients. As you may know, TAVI is the biggest revolution in heart valve treatment in our lifetime because it delivers a replacement heart valve without open heart surgery. As you may know, it's performed by delivering a stent-based replacement valve via a catheter, typically inserted in the groin. The problem that we're solving is that the durability of current transcatheter valves is much less than that of surgical valves, and the majority of patients are younger and therefore continue to require surgery. This is evidenced by the duopoly that has remained in this space since it was started in 2007 in Europe. It was an absolutely revolutionary technology, particularly for surgery ineligible patients. But as with medical devices, the iterations can be slow and the evolution continues. Today, the tall but self-expanding core valve acquired by Medtronic is still 4.5 centimeters tall, which blocks or cages the coronary arteries and therefore limits reintervention. In addition, thrombus can form on the frames, potentially dislodge into the path of blood flow and cause a heart attack via the coronaries. A short valve would be much better, and that's what Edwards Life Sciences acquired. Their Sapien platform is 2 centimeters tall. However, it requires 2 to 3 atmospheres of pressure for deployment, which is about as much pressure as is required to blow up the tires of your car. That could potentially crush the leaflets against the device's frame. While that is not an acute problem, we're convinced that that is part of the reason that their valve showed in one of the few long-term studies available that at 7 to 8 years, 50% of the surviving patients showed signs of degeneration. That is simply unacceptable for younger patients because surgical valves are known to last 12 to 18 years or longer. What's required is a short but self-expanding transcatheter valve with no further design limitations. That's exactly what our Optimum TAV is. It was designed after the natural valve. It's also about 2 centimeters tall. In addition to avoiding the design limitations I mentioned, it also has no suture holes in the flexion zone or the moving part of the leaflet, unlike most transcatheter valves. As we've learned from the 50-year history of surgical valves, a single suture hole in the flexion zone can promote calcification and wear and tear of the leaflets. And so our valve is designed much more like a surgical valve in that sense. We've already demonstrated preclinical superiority in the 2 standard tests. One is the accelerated wear test, also known as the durability test, which is run at about 1 million cycles a day, or 10 times our natural heart rate. The FDA requires 200 million cycles, which is run over 6 months and simulates about 5 1/3 years of life. Our valve has surpassed 24 years with no signs of degeneration. And in the same test, we had a control surgical valve, which started showing wear or degeneration at about 15 years, which is pretty similar to its clinical use. So we think it's pretty accurate. But more telling for valves is the 5-month sheep study in young sheep. And this has been used instead of long-term clinical data to approve many valves. And our valve showed less calcification than even another very well-known surgical valve. And we think that's partly due to our superior design, including no sutures in the flexion zone. What this means for the market is that the younger majority will be able to avoid open heart surgery. Today, it's primarily octogenarians or patients over 75 that are getting TAVI regularly, fully reimbursed by CMS and many other reimbursement agencies around the world. But for now, even though low-risk patients for surgery are approved for TAVI, doctors don't feel comfortable giving it when they're younger patients because surgical valves are known to last 12 to 18 years. And as these patients age further, reintervention becomes more difficult. So a more durable transcatheter valve could add at least $6 billion to the current annual market. We've already demonstrated clinical feasibility. Our Brazilian licensee, LabCorp Laboratorios, has started a trial in December of 2018. LabCorp has been selling surgical valves globally for 30 years, so they know the space very well and decided to partner with us. The first patient, age 79, was walking the next day. On day 4, she left the hospital and she was doing very well still. And after all her checkups, and they've since implanted 2 additional patients with device success. Our next steps are to take our current funding to sponsor our own first-in-human studies towards the CE mark or European approval in Germany and Poland, while obtaining ongoing clinical data from LabCorp. And we also have a second licensee, Wideline of China, affiliated with the China Cardiovascular Research Foundation, who has a similar agreement with us. And both licensees will eventually provide us royalties on their sales in their respective jurisdictions. That's all of South America and Greater China. But everything they're doing is on their dime, and we're just collecting clinical data and then royalties on sales. So with these 3 sources of clinical data, we will eventually be able to get a CE mark. However, we want to control our own destiny, and that's why we are now raising up to $8 million to complete the full CE mark trial. Most of the acquisitions in our space occurred during such a trial or soon thereafter, which is what we think is likely in our case. In summary, there is definitely a need for a more durable transcatheter valve to overtake all of surgery. We've already demonstrated preclinical superiority and have ongoing clinical data to back up our durability claims. We have validation not only from our 2 licensed partners joining hands with us, many patents on our valve. We've also raised $7 million from our 2 licensed partners and about 100 other investors, including many physicians, angel groups, entrepreneurs. And based on the acquisitions in our space, which occurred mostly during the CE mark trial, acquisitions could range from $155 million to over $1 billion now that the space is generating so much revenue. So we think the ROI would be 5 to 10x at least within 1 to 3 years for a full $8 million. I'll take a minute now, since we have the time, just to mention our founder. Dr. Mano Tupragar literally wrote the book on the aortic valve over 25 years ago. And valve makers use it today, even though it's out of print, to design valves. And that's why our 2 medical advisors, the most experienced physicians in the country, Dr. Matt Williams, the first surgeon and who's an interventionalist who heads the program at NYU, and Dr. Sushil Kadali over at Columbia University in New York. They continue to guide us in our clinical studies and catheter development. And I welcome any questions, and thank you all for your time.
Samir, thank you so much. Thanks for telling us about TAVI, and I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Freeman to do a little Q&A. It looks like we have some questions from our attendees.
So Samir, excellent. This is really quite revolutionary. So a few questions. You know, you've all heard the phrase, there's no free lunch. So looks like it's more durable. That sounds great. It looks like it works like other valves, but what does it cost in terms of, is it harder to place? Do you still use the same techniques? You mentioned about the potential crushing with balloon inflation. This one appears to be self-expanding, but what are the caveats? What should we be on the lookout for?
So other than most of the valves actually do use a self-expanding or nitinol frame. That's the way to go if you can do it, because it's obvious what balloon expansion, what kind of risk there is. If you're asking for secret sauce, it's just knowing the aortic valve. There's no special techniques we're using for the procedure. It's still using a catheter that's about 7 millimeters in outer diameter to go through the femoral artery to deliver it. We have other access points we can use with our catheter. As with most interventional devices, we're continuing to iterate our catheter during the clinical studies, but the valve has reached design freeze, and we're doing pretty much everything that everyone before us has done. That's one of the benefits of being a second mover. Does that answer the question, Dr. Freeman?
Yeah, and then further is, as you probably know, lots of people now are doing valve and valve, right? So you have one of these other TAVRs that fails, or even, there are other types of valves that are implanted. Can this do valve and valve, or is that something you're not quite ready for?
We've done experiments that show we can do valve and valve, and one of the reasons we're certain we can do it is because the valve has such a large opening or effective orifice area, EOA. Essentially, what any bioprosthetic valve or replacement valve is trying to do is they're opening a narrowing of the gateway of the aortic valve. So the more bioprosthetic valves you place inside another, the more narrowing you're making it. And so the larger the EOA you start with, the more likely you can do a valve and valve or revalving, as you mentioned. And so our valve can definitely do it because we have a very large EOA. But because it's more durable, we think you're less likely to need it with our valve because it'll last that long without calcifying.
Excellent. And has this also been tested with bicuspid valve patients?
We've done some experiments with human cadaver hearts successfully. That's not as much of a challenge, I think, as revalving. But as you know, bicuspid valves or patients, even though they make up 1% of the global population, they make up to 45% of aortic stenosis patients. So, but they tend to be much younger because it's a congenital disorder.
So with what you've talked about, it looks like this could potentially replace the existing valve vendors. So I'm imagining that Edwards and some of the others out there are probably eyeing you with either the want to acquire or to put you out of your misery. So what's been the talk with some of the bigger vendors, if any?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious players are Edwards and Medtronic, who have the duopoly. There's also Boston Scientific, who's trying to learn valves. Abbott, who acquired St. Jude's. But there's not that many other companies that are so specialized to know surgical valves, which is what you really need to know to understand the durability, even for transcatheter valves. The talks over the years have been, come back to us when you have sufficient clinical data. The key question is, what is sufficient? Especially when your preclinical data can be so telling. And so we have a few patients, and we think it's just a matter of time, literally months potentially, but our currency now is clinical data until we get the word out on some of this preclinical data via white papers.
Absolutely agreed. Well, I have no further questions, Katie.
Great. Thank you, Samir, for talking to us about TAVI tonight. We're going to go ahead and put the last poll up. We would again appreciate your feedback, and we will again get this back to the startups. If there are any lingering questions, we will allow, again, those to be answered in our follow-up forum, which will be via LinkedIn. So watch for a link or an invitation to that LinkedIn group where you will be able to continue to ask questions and interact with our startup founders and CEOs. While you're filling out this last poll, and again, thank you for doing so. I think this feedback is very valuable for the startups, and I know they will take it to heart. I just want to give some thanks, and I would love to say thanks to the American College of Cardiology and Dr. Andrew Freeman for being our Q&A moderator tonight, and ACC being one of our sponsors. I also want to say thank you to all of our startups that were here tonight. Atandra with RCE, William with Corinnova, as well as Samir with TAVI. Thank you for definitely the opportunity to learn more about your startups, and I think there were some great questions. So thanks to all of our attendees for joining tonight. I know that people are very excited to move on to the next big event of the evening, the presidential debate. But again, I want to thank you for being here on behalf of AngelMD. We're going to shut things down a little early so people can get on with their evening. So thank you so much for being here tonight, and we hope you join us in another 2 weeks for our next AngelMD Pitch Club, which will be startups in the area of emergency medicine. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.